few minutes as you socialize. I'm going to invite Supervisor Brown up to kick us off this afternoon. Thank you, Supervisor Brown. So I hope this, can you hear me?
No.
It's probably but I want to thank all of you for being here. Mendocino County Board of Supervisors first committed to the Stepping Up initiative in June 2015 by adopting a resolution in partnership with the National Association of Counties and the California State Association of Counties. The resolution commitments included convening a diverse team of leaders and decision makers from multiple agencies, committed to safety, reducing the number of people with mental illnesses in the jails, collecting data and assessing individuals' needs in order to better identify adults with mental illness entering the Mendocino County Jail, use data from both our behavioral health systems and our justice system, including the jail, probation department, and courts, to guide decision-making at the system, program, and individual levels. Identify state and local policy and funding barriers to minimize contact with the justice system and providing treatment and supports within the community. Develop a plan with measurable outcomes that draws on jail assessment and data and the examination of available treatment and services. Implement research-based approaches that advance the plan. Create a process to track processes using data and information systems and to report on successes. I want to thank the local team of leaders that have come together to assess our data and develop a local plan. I especially want to thank our local chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness for hosting this event here today. Our board agrees with NAMI that recovery, resiliency, and support are essential to improving the quality of life for all individuals affected by mental illness, and that getting the people with mental illness out of the jail and into treatment is a top priority. The Stepping Up initiative calls on counties to establish processes to systematically identify people who have serious mental health illnesses who enter the jails. The goal is to have every county collect accurate, accessible data on these individuals because the prevalence of serious mental illness in jails is 3 to 6 times higher than that of the general population. And probably Mendocino County among jails has even a higher rate. A recent data poll in Mendocino County's jails showed that of 279 inmates, 30 of the 279 have a serious mental illness. 104 of the 279 inmates were on psychiatric medications. Average length of stay for those with mental illness was 156 days. 14 individuals are going through the competency to stand trial process, with 8 individuals being placed in state hospitals that are too incompetent to stand trial. Mendocino County is committed to a community-based approach to enhance and extend the treatment of mental illness and substance abuse disorders. The Board of Supervisors is proud to have supported the Major B initiative and how that will be used to further enhance mental health services in Mendocino County. The Board of Supervisors is also committed to a new jail unit that will provide better confinement and services for inmates with mental health issues. And our bottom line is our commitment in this strong county-wide effort. All have been touched, all of us, by mental illness in our own families, those of our friends and neighbors, or by an incident in our life. We look forward to everyone's participation today as we look for new ways to reduce the number of people with mental illnesses in jail and assure an appropriate level of care for every individual. So truly, thank you for being here today, and I'd like to introduce the Honorable Ann Warren.
So good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Judge Ann Mormon. I'm currently the presiding judge of the 8 judges of the Mendocino County Superior Court. I see a lot of faces out here that I know, work with. And I too want to, on behalf of the court, both our judiciary and our staff, thank you for assembling here today to engage yourselves in the Stepping Up initiative. By my presence here today, although it's just going to be short because I have court, is a way to say to each of you that the court stands behind the Stepping Up initiative, that we are committed to integrating our court system into the overall plan to deliver the services that Supervisor Brown outlined and the goals that she identified. We are fully in concurrence of that. I want to just say for a moment some things that we are doing at the court and maybe leave you with a perspective that you can carry forward into your planning this afternoon and beyond. So the court system, we talk about the jail, we talk about people being arrested, people who are have serious mental illnesses. And since I've been a judge, this is my 9th year, I will say I've had the privilege of working closely with the staff, the City of Ukiah Police. I see members of the City of Ukiah Police here today, where the court system, the District Attorney's Office, the Public Defender's Office, the Probation Department, and our local law enforcement, we have, in my view, started a very constructive, positive dialogue to try to reduce the number of people in confinement who are experiencing mental illnesses, and whether they're a DSM-5 diagnosis or something more episodic in nature. And I feel that we do have good communication, and we share the goal that our law enforcement agencies, our court systems, our prosecutor's office, and our public defender's offices, we do not want to be in the business of incarcerating people with mental illnesses. I can assure you that the police departments around the county, the sheriff, the DA, the public defender, and my colleagues, we're the only people looking to have less work. But we are inundated with, in all of our departments, not just our criminal department, but I sit in the child welfare department, trying to work with people who have either a serious mental illness or, as I in a non-technical jargon, are going through a time of life that could be temporary, should be temporary, but somehow the circumstances of their life have gotten away from them, and they've either had their children removed, or they've been arrested, or their daughter's been arrested, or their husband, or their son, or they've been the victim of violence by someone with a mental illness. And we do unfortunately see that in a very common way. And our police departments and our sheriff's department are regularly confronted with being the first responder to somebody with a mental illness, whether it's long-standing or short-lived. In my view, it doesn't really matter. So I'm excited. The judiciary is behind this initiative 1,000% that we can design a program and a plan in our county, not just to identify those that need help, those that need services, but to provide the services in a wraparound and consistent fashion so people don't fall through the cracks, and that we can provide a safe community for everybody, and that we can tolerate and support and treat every single person who either has a mental health issue, perhaps co-occurring with a substance abuse problem, so we can restore them to being a constructive member of our society, because they all want to be, they just sometimes don't know how to be and they can't identify the resources for themselves. We've been lucky at the court system in our last 6 or 7 years. We do have a behavioral health court that's intended to provide wraparound services to people who are in the criminal justice system already, who are diagnosed with a serious mental illness. We do in conjunction with probation and revenue quality management, the Cabin House, Hospitality Center, Manzanita, and with the Public Defender's Office, the Defense Bar, and the Prosecutor's Office. We do try to identify people who are already in the criminal justice system that we feel we can provide wraparound services to, that I can supervise with the authority of my position to restore them to full health. And I admire all of you you're really the people in the trenches doing the work. I wish I could stay this afternoon and join you in learning and being inspired by the speakers you're going to hear from, because I think you will. I had dinner with one of them last night, and she's a very inspiring person. But I want to thank you for your work, your dedication to achieving full health for all members of our community. Thank you for having me. Enjoy your day.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Janine Miller. I am the Behavioral Health Director for Mendocino County. And I'm going to start off with just something really quickly. I want you guys to be able to see who your stepping up committee is and the committed members that have joined the committee to really make sure that this stepping up effort goes forward. And so I'm going to ask if those committee members are here, if they could at least stand for a second so people can see who you are. First, we have Supervisor Carrie Brown. Judge Ann Mormon. Carmel Angelo, our county CEO. Kim Turner, who is the court CEO. I do not believe she's present today.
She's not.
Tom Allman, our sheriff. Tim Pierce, our jail commander. Katie Ford from probation. Rebecca Craig, who is not present today, but she is a consultant. Oh, she is, yeah. Beth Norman with our district attorney's office. Dr. Gary Pace, who is our public health officer. Dan Gordy with our Behavioral Health Advisory Board. Donna Muschetti with NAMI. Tim Schrader with Redwood Quality Management. Mary LeClaire with our Public Defender's Office. Tammy Moss-Chetler. We have Tammy Moss-Chetler, who's our HHSA Director. Randy Smith, who's with our Substance Use Disorders Treatment. And then myself, the Behavioral Health Director for Mendocino. Thank you very much. I wanted to take a second just to talk a little bit about our mental health system in Mendocino County. And what I think is important is to understand what the county's role is within mental health, because there's a lot of confusion with how does the county system work and who does the county serve and what does that look like. And I think it gives a broader picture when you're able to see how the system really works together. The county is, how the county is function is they're a county mental health plan. We are contracted with the Department of Healthcare Services to provide a county mental health plan, which is carved out from other Medi-Cal services. We operate a plan that's called Specialty Mental Health Services. That means we're contracted to provide mental health services to a specific population within the county, and those are the people who are most seriously mentally ill. We serve individuals who have a DSM-5 diagnosis that is within the serious mental ill category and has a functional impairment that impacts their ability to function with everyday living. if somebody does not meet one of those criteria, they really fall into a category called mild to moderate, and then they're served through a different process and not through the county system. So a lot of times people wonder, county serves everybody who has a mental health disorder, and that's actually not the case. The county only serves the most severe. Some people sometimes say our system is like seeing a specialist. You go to a general practitioner, and then they refer you when you have an illness that needs to be seen by a specialist. In this case, special mental health is your specialist, which is why we serve that special population. In Mendocino County, another unique thing for our county is that we contract out most of our special mental health services to Redwood Quality Management Company as an administrative service organization. They work to make sure that they oversee all of the special mental health services and contract with subcontractors to provide those services throughout our county. And I know that sounds confusing at times, but they are if you heard it, they're like a second party, and then they contract with third parties, and then they kind of contract and provide those services and oversee those services. So what does Redwood Quality Management Company do? They contract out services, they coordinate with the county and community partners, they really oversee crisis response, your regular, especially mental health outpatient services, medication support services. That's kind of in a nutshell. And then for what the county still holds, and the county still does, we oversee our access lines. So if someone calls and needs access to services, we're still providing those services. We oversee the conservatorships, those individuals who've been declared to no longer be able to make their basic needs and provide for their self-care, get put on a conservatorship. You'll hear it called an LPS conservatorship. We case manage those and make sure that they get into placements that can meet their needs. We also oversee some supplemental mental health services, and I'll go a little bit more into that in a minute. And then we do contract oversight, monitoring of the ASO and the system of care, and then work with the State of California Department of Health Care Services to make sure we're meeting all our contractual requirements. Mental health also has some, if you've ever heard of Mental Health Services Act funds, it's a tax on the millionaire where we get some additional funding and we can provide some additional services outside of special mental health services. But those really are a function on prevention and early interventions. Those services do expand a little bit more to provide to any population who's not stuck right in that special mental health requirement, Medi-Cal requirements, but you still have a special population you have to meet. So it still has some requirements that we have to stay within our little box, as I call it, because we really are in a box with Medi-Cal and county mental health services. I also want to talk about, just really quick, substance use disorders treatment. We know that with stepping up that substance use is a risk factor. It's also a reason people recidivate, and we know that we have a substance use issue within Mendocino County and within the county jail and the county system. So the county does provide substance use disorders treatment. We provide them out of the Ukiah, Fort Bragg, and Willits area. The services that we provide are assessments, treatment planning, crisis counseling, individual counseling, group counseling, and discharge planning. We really focus, we have multiple programs. A lot of people think we don't have adolescent programs. We do have adolescent programs. We actually have adolescent counselors in some of the local schools. We also provide outpatient. I hear a lot, we don't provide outpatient services. We only work with the drug courts, and I just want to clear that up. We do provide outpatient services. We do have drug court programs, an adult drug court program, a family dependency drug court program, a perinatal program for anybody who is pregnant or recently had a child that needs services. We have a perinatal program. We also do substance use education and treatment. We also, on the mental health side, have an outreach worker who goes out and does treatment trainings and education for mental health also on substance use. And so just really quick, some supplemental things I wanted to add that's kind of important about the system. Some new things that have come up and things that we are doing that may have not been in the system before. Some of you may know we opened the Willow Terrace Housing, which is on Goby Street. It's a 38-bedroom apartment complex for those that have a special mental health and meet the criteria for a full-service partnership. One of those units will be filled with a manager of the complex. The rest will be filled with individuals who have a serious mental illness, are at risk of homeless, or are homeless. So really exciting change there. We have a wonderful program with Round Valley on innovation, creating crisis response and crisis respite in the Coppola Round Valley area. Full Service Partnerships is a wraparound case management program we've had for a while, but it's a great addition to services. We have outpatient assisted treatment. If anyone has heard of Laura's Law, We have implemented Laura's Law in Mendocino County. It's called Assisted Outpatient Treatment. We have a local outreach and prevention services teams. We have 3 teams that go out into 3 different areas of the county and serve those counties. They're out meeting people at the clinics or homes, taking them to appointments. We have 1 team located in North County, so they really serve Laytonville, Coppola area. Our 2nd team is out of the South Coast, Point Arena, Gualala. And then we have a team that's really in the Boonville, Anderson Valley area. Whole Person Care is another grant-funded program we implemented in Mendocino County, really focusing on those that have mental health and serious mental health services to provide a more wraparound service approach to them that's not tied to Medi-Cal funding. In the last 2 years, we implemented jail-based treatment services for substance abuse treatment. We did not have substance abuse treatment in our county jail. We were able to, with AB 109 funds and the support of probation, implement a treatment program within their county jail where individuals are getting substance abuse treatment services in the county jail and getting connected to services when they leave. And we have also, this year, very exciting, added a discharge planner position to our county jail so that every individual that walks into that county jail will be reviewed to see whether or not they need to be connected to either mental health or substance use disorders treatment upon discharge from the county jail and making sure that they're getting the appropriate medication while they're in jail and upon discharge. So some things that are on the horizon for us in the behavioral health world, we have a No Place Like Home grant funding that's coming. It's going to provide some additional housing dollars for us to look at more housing options like Willow Terrace for our especially mental health population. We're really looking forward to the Medi-Cal 2020 organized delivery system for drug Medi-Cal, which will expand our substance use disorders treatment programs within the county. And then, of course, Measure B, as Measure B looks and implements some additional options within our community. We're really looking forward to that. One of the things I want to wrap up with, just so people always ask, who serves the mild to moderate mental health population? Well, that's served by the local clinics. It's served through their private insurance companies. So in Medi-Cal world, if you're mild to moderate, you're served by a company called Deacon that is contracted through Partnership Health Plan of California. If you have private insurance, you are served by your private insurance regardless if you're mild, moderate, or severe. Your private insurance covers all of your mental health needs. Veteran Services has their own mental health services that they usually provide. There are veterans who still get services through the county, but Veteran Services does have some mental health services. And then we have local providers who contract with Beacon to provide services to your mild to moderate, and then with the health clinics also provide services to the mild to moderate population. So I'd like to take this time to introduce our CEO, Carmel Angela.
Well, good afternoon. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all here today, so thank you very much for joining us. We're actually really excited to be able to put this on here in Ukiah and also tomorrow in Fort Bragg. So thank you all for joining us today. I would also like to recognize some people that are with us. We know that Judge Mormon has been with us, and we also have, of course, Supervisor Carrie Brown, who's the chair of our board. We also have Supervisor John McCowan with us and Supervisor John Hashjack. And we also have our Ukiah Mayor, Maureen Mulhern. I also want to recognize Dr. Ace Barish, who's sitting in the room with us. And Dr. Barish is the chair of our Measure B committee, and if you have an interest in mental health, then you know that Measure B was passed by the voters, and it has a very unique focus in assisting to continue working on the continuum of care in mental health. And so Dr. Barish took over as chair in January. In the past 4 months, we've made some great strides in getting recommendations to the board and some actions that are much needed. So thank you, Dr. Barish, for your leadership with Measure B. I don't want to forget to thank our NAMI partners Today's event and tomorrow's event is put on as a collaborative with the County of Mendocino, behavioral health, mental health, and also with NAMI. And so I'd like to thank Donna Muschetti and Jan McGordy, who's also the chair of our Behavioral Health Board, for all the work that they put into today and tomorrow. Okay, all right, so I think we're just about done now. And so I'll go ahead and introduce the speakers. So again, we're really fortunate to have our two speakers with us today. Both of them are known for their work in this particular field. I'm going to give you a very brief bio on Farah McDade-Ting first, and then on Elizabeth Siggins. And Farah will be coming up and speaking, and then Elizabeth will be following her. But Farah serves as the legislative representative for health and behavioral health with the California State Association of Counties. And that may not mean much to you, but that's CSAC. And CSAC is our statewide organization that represents all the counties. And they are instrumental in helping us with legislation and helping us to deal with issues that happen not only in large metropolitan areas, but also in rural counties like ours. So we're very appreciative for all the work that CSAC does, and also very appreciative that CSAC has allowed Farah to come over here, particularly this week, when tomorrow will be a very big day within the state regarding the budget. So Farah specializes in California health and behavioral health services that are administered by counties and have an impact on counties, and has done so since 2007. And prior to 2007, she served as the CSAC Ledge Analyst on a variety of issues, including employee relations, agriculture, natural resources, transportation, housing, and Indian gaming issues. She began her career at CSAC in 2009, serving on the public affairs side of the organization and as a communications analyst. And before coming to CSAC, Farah was an assistant editor at the California Journal, which is a nonpartisan government and politics-focused monthly magazine in Sacramento. She earned her bachelor's degree in government and journalism and graduated cum laude from California State University of Sacramento in 1999. Farah is married, has 2 young children, and enjoys traveling through all of the counties as part of her work and pleasure, if you can believe that. So thank you, Farah, for joining us. So before you come up, let me go ahead and just tell you a little bit about Elizabeth Siggins, who is a consultant, works with the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Elizabeth is a consultant on a number of criminal justice reform initiatives in California, and there are many initiatives around criminal justice, mental health, behavioral health within the state right now. She has worked in the criminal justice field for over 20 years in both government and community-based organizations. She was the director of rehabilitative programs at the California Department of Corrections and Rehab, where she oversaw the rehabilitative programs in over 30 state prisons, as well as the reentry programs for those being released from prison. Some of her current consulting projects include working with the Council of State Governments Justice Center on the National Stepping Up Initiative, one of the reasons she's here, the National Stepping Up Initiative to reduce the number of people with mental illness in county jails, with the Chief Probation Officers of California on the Continuum of Care Reform, and with Californians for Safety and Justice on their Blueprint for Shared Safety. Elizabeth previously worked with the California State Senate and the Office of the Inspector General. So with that, I'd like you all to help me welcome Farah up here, and then Elizabeth will speak.
Good afternoon. I'm Farah McDade-Ting, and I want to thank Carmel and the entire county for such a warm welcome. Elizabeth and I have felt very comfortable and welcome here, and we truly appreciate it. While I do come from Sacramento, I was in Sacramento for about 20 years, which I can't believe. I've been there for 20 years. I do come from rural Placer County, so being in areas like Ukiah and Mendocino County feels like home to me, and I just can't tell you how pleased I am to be here today. Beautiful day. I work in health and behavioral health in Sacramento, and as Carmel mentioned, CSAC we represent all 58 counties in California, and that's a challenge because we have many different kinds of counties, from of course LA County, which is larger than most states, population-wise, to even tiny Alpine County, which has about 1,000 people in it. So the challenges of figuring out what matters to Alpine Mendocino and LA is what we do every day. It is quite the challenge, let me tell you. In the health and behavioral health sphere, it's very challenging. A lot of what it comes down to, at least in Sacramento, because we aren't the frontline folks like you are, serving the community, working with community members, working with your county government, your city governments, law enforcement, and others. In Sacramento, when we talk about policy, a lot of it comes down to fiscal issues. And so we talk about funding streams that are divorced from the actual services that you're working to provide in your communities. So again, I'm so pleased to be here today to be in front of you and talk about this, and also talk about kind of how we look at it from the county perspective in Sacramento. For us, behavioral health has become the linchpin to a lot of the major policy issues we're dealing with in Sacramento and in our communities. That includes, of course, criminal justice and the criminal justice system, which we'll be focusing on, and Elizabeth will talk quite a bit about. It also includes, of course, the healthcare system. We talk about co-occurring disorders, which typically in our world, our mental health means someone with a mental health diagnosis and substance use disorder. But the healthcare folks also talk about it as someone with a chronic health issue and potentially a behavioral health issue. And so we intersect with the healthcare system. You heard from Janine about how counties deal with the specialty mental health services, and then we have this bifurcation where the plans, partnership health plans and others, serve the mild to moderate. Anybody who has ever worked with humans knows that we can toggle between mild to moderate and chronic and severe. And so that's one of the challenges we face. This was a decision made by the policymakers in Sacramento about who should do what and who has the resources to serve folks. And while the resources line up pretty well, the health plans do receive funding to treat mild to moderate, and counties do have several funding streams for the chronic and severe. For that person, that one patient or client, trying to navigate those two systems can be really difficult. Add on top of that, navigating the criminal justice system, perhaps an educational system, whether it's a K-12 school or maybe a college or a university, and you have a lot of doors that someone with a mental health issue might need to knock on. And so that's one of the challenges, again, that we work on from the county perspective. The Stepping Up Coalition, and I think Supervisor Brown mentioned that Mendocino County was the first county to sign on to the Stepping Up Coalition, which came out of the National Association of Counties, which represents all the counties, well, most of the counties in the United States, and counties and parishes. And what they wanted to focus on at the national level was the issue of criminal justice and mental illness and that intersection there. And Mendocino County, the board, and others saw an opportunity there and signed up onto the Stepping Up Coalition and have been working on it for a couple of years. Mendocino County is very special in that you also approve Measure H, which is something that the vast majority of counties do not have that resource or that community support for mental health issues, so we're really excited about that. The other way that we see that we intersect with behavioral health from the county supervisor perspective is not just the healthcare system, which I mentioned, of course the criminal justice system. A lot of the child welfare services and our family reunification services, typically there are behavioral health issues. We've probably heard a lot as providers about the recent emphasis on trauma-informed care and ACEs scores, where there's this very, very elegant and easy screening tool to determine if a child or an adult has had adverse childhood experiences. And you can screen for adverse childhood experiences, and there's quite a bit of research now, about 30 years of research, that shows decreased or worsening health, behavioral health, even economic outcomes for folks who have a lot of adverse childhood experiences. And so we we intersect with the child welfare services and our family support system here in the county and in the schools. And then the other large issue on which CSAC has been focused on for the last 2 years very strongly is homelessness. I want to be clear, we hear this from some policymakers, including our new governor. We've had a couple talks with him, we're still getting him on board on this. Not every person who is homeless has a mental health disorder or diagnosis. People tend to paint homelessness with a broad brush in that way. So we work really hard to try to meet the needs of folks who do not have housing, and yes, there is a proportion that do have a mental illness or substance use disorder. But another proportion, it depends on which county, what community you're in, who do not. But for those who do have a mental health diagnosis, counties have been working hard to break down the silos, like Mendocino County is working on right now, between criminal justice. So if your sheriff's deputy picks up someone on the street that's been homeless and is disturbing the peace, that there can be an assessment of that person to see if they have a mental health disorder or substance use disorder, potentially working with Judge Mormon and others to divert that person from the jail, and then to work with the behavioral health department to ensure that they get the services they need. That really has been what I've focused on the last couple of years in Sacramento, and unfortunately, we've made some progress there. We have some new funding, some homelessness funding from last year. Governor Newsom is proposing some new homelessness funding. But these funding streams, like many of the funding streams we see in county behavioral health, are very discrete and prescriptive. Janine talked about the Mental Health Services Act funding, which is a critical funding stream for all counties. But you can't spend that in certain ways. You can't spend Mental Health Services Act money in the jails. Nor for people who are on parole from the state prison system. But you can spend other funding, but you also can't spend Medi-Cal funding in jails, but you can spend Medi-Cal on probation. And so there's all these different ways that policymakers put parameters around how you're supposed to spend the money. And again, like I mentioned, that bifurcation between mild and moderate, chronic, and severe people aren't a funding stream. Typically, in county land, we touch people in a lot of different ways. So that's one of the major challenges we work on. I did want to say that despite all this, these different funding streams, there is some funding. So that's a plus. That's not something I usually get to say. I've been at CSAC for a long, long time, through 2 recessions, the Great One and the 2001-2002 recession. And in county land, we're the first ones to get cut by the state government when they have a budget deficit. Right now, we're in a completely different scenario, although they do expect a recession of some kind on the horizon. But we have such an amazing opportunity right now. One thing that CSAC and counties will be working on is not only strengthening the bonds with the criminal justice system to work together to get better outcomes there, but we also see partnership opportunities with our local schools. Again, counties may serve a child in the child welfare services system in our mental health system, and yet the school is also providing services as well. So how can we partner with the schools? I know Mendocino has some good partnership with schools. There are other counties who do not, who don't talk to the schools in their region. And so we're missing opportunities there. Also, other community-based partners, and again, Mendocino County has a strong community-based partner infrastructure and great people in the Measure H steering committee. And so you've got the first couple steps of breaking down those silos and working together. Mendocino County is well on its way. Elizabeth will follow me and talk a little bit more about stepping up and what that means. Talk to you a little bit about why stepping up was conceived and what it can do for communities. Again, I want to thank you for coming today on this beautiful afternoon, and we'll be available for questions and others afterwards. Thank you.
One second, I have some slides. Pull those up. Give that a minute to come up. Okay, this should be loading. Just while we're waiting for this to load, it'd be great to get a little bit of a sense of who's here in the room. So I was just sitting there thinking, how can I do this? Because I could go to 8 different categories, and we're going to talk a lot about breaking down silos. But for a minute, I'm going to let you place yourself in a silo. So how many of you work? The 2 options right now are going to be sort of on the criminal justice side or the health side, right? So and you can raise both hands if you're but so which would be great, we're super excited. So how many folks in the room work more on sort of the criminal justice, law enforcement, court side of this work as we talk about this intersection? Great, okay, oh good, there's some double hands up, good. And then how many are sort of more on the health, mental health, substance abuse side? Great, okay, good, so it's helpful to have a sense. Anyone from education? Okay, and there could be many other fields, but it's great to get that sense. And then one other question, how many of you have actually heard of Stepping Up? Okay, good, a fair number, great. Okay, let's see. Oh, before I go any further, another thing I just wanted to do is move the slide. Hold on. Sorry. Maybe it did work earlier. May is Mental Health Month. It is also Stepping Up Action Month. Thank you. I can put my glasses on, but they're not required. For those of you who are on social media, please step up for mental health. We'll talk at the end about some things that we can do as part of the Stepping Up Action Month. I want to make sure that Mendocino County is getting credit for this. Let me tell you just for a minute, just a little bit about the Council of State Government's Justice Center, who I'm here on behalf of today. Csg Justice Center is a national nonprofit organization. It actually represents all 3 branches of government and works on a variety of different policy areas. The Justice Center is the criminal justice, if you will, arm of the Justice of CSG. And they have been working in this field of the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health for a long time. They also serve as the national technical assistance provider for on many of the large federal grants, have done Second Chance Act grants, reentry, and they also run the National Reentry Clearinghouse, which is there are a lot of great resources through the CSG Justice Center. So I encourage you to check out some of their resources. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about sort of a little bit of how did we get here? What is this problem that we brings people out on a beautiful sunny day to come and try to figure out? What is the Stepping Up Initiative? What is the 6 questions framework, which is really how the Stepping Up Initiative is organized? And then thinking about some next steps here in Mendocino County. So, as I mentioned, and as you all probably know, there have been folks grappling and working on this issue for a while. In California, a lot of people go back to the Consensus Project, which was an effort actually kind of led by the Judicial Council out of the courts to really try to understand what is happening, how come we're ending up seeing so many people with mental illnesses in our criminal justice system. And you don't have to understand this chart, but the idea, you get the idea. It was like kind of trying to map this out, and this is all of the various intersections. This was a project that the Justice Center did help work on. And a lot of times, particularly in the public sector, when we're talking about criminal justice reform, et cetera, we focus a lot on prisons and talk about prison reform. But the reality is, jail admissions are far higher than prison admissions. And so when we're talking about individuals who have contact with the justice system, it is much more at the jail level. And part of that is because jails are a much shorter level of stay, right? So there's people come in that front door far more often. So just getting a size and scope, if we're really talking about annual or weekly contact, jail admissions, lots of people impacted by that. One of the things you're going to hear me talk a fair amount about today is the importance of actually getting better data and having a better sense of what this problem is. We don't have a great handle on that, but based on a number of different studies that have sort of consistently found sort of relatively similar results in our national estimates of the about 11 million people who are going into jail annually, about 2 million have serious mental illness. A lot of work has gone into addressing this issue. Judge Worman talked about the behavioral health court here, and so just as one example, back in 1997 there was one mental health court in the country, and we're now to hundreds of them, and all throughout California. We have these set up. So not because people haven't been trying to figure out how to tackle this issue, and yet jails are still the de facto mental health system. So jails report, and the sense is that there is an increase in the number of people with mental illness. So as we've seen jail populations go down, these numbers here are specifically out of New York City, but we did a survey here in California a couple of years ago. It was not based on hard data, because again, as we'll talk about in a little bit, that could be hard to get, but definitely based on perceptions. The idea of what the sense was that it is growing as a problem. This was actually, this is one of the studies that we can refer to, where we see the total jail population going down, but the number of people with mental illness who are in jails going up. So as a percentage of the population, an increase. Now, another thing that we will talk about today is that when we say mental illness, that can mean many different things, and we could be talking about many different definitions. We'll at the very end, one of the resources that I'll point to is a project we did last year where we pulled a number of folks from California together and actually came up with kind of a recommended shared definition. There's no requirements that people use it, but the idea, we had a group of both criminal justice and mental health professionals get together and try to come up with something that would kind of help bridge some of this divide. So the bottom line, despite the fact that we don't have the kind of data we would like to have, we're definitely, all of the studies are consistent in that showing that people with mental illnesses are overrepresented in our jails. Roughly, the estimates are, somewhere between 15 to 20% of people in jail have a serious mental illness. And then, as you can see, of that, the estimates are that a significant proportion, maybe up to 2/3, 3/4, have a co-occurring substance use disorder. And then, really important to keep in mind that a majority of these individuals are also dealing with other challenges, whether it be homelessness, other chronic medical conditions, etc. So this is a complex problem. So not only do we have a significant portion of the people in jail with mental illness and a perception, at least a sense, that this may be an increasing problem, we also see from a lot of the studies longer stays in jail. And so I know that there were, I think it was Janine mentioned the data that actually had a recent count of the length of stay, and that's one of the parts of, we'll talk about the measures that we focus on in stepping up. But so longer stays in jail, whether we're talking about the pretrial population or the sentenced population, the dark green group here is the group that was identified with mental illness. This is specific data, just giving you an idea, out of Salt Lake County. In Utah, we saw average lengths of stay almost twice what it was for people not living with a serious mental illness. And as you can see, kind of as they began to do some estimates, 122 bed days a year could be opened up if the average lengths of stay were the same. We also see higher recidivism rates. So this study suggests not necessarily people being more likely to be arrested, but certainly more likely to be revoked. And a lower utilization of, or not lower, but a low utilization of evidence-based practices. So this is the estimated almost 3 million adults in the country living with both serious mental illness and co-occurring disorders. You can see, more than a third of them getting no treatment, about half getting mental health only, and a very, 12% getting both mental health and the substance use disorder treatment that they need. And so that piece of it, that integration of services being critical to actually effectively addressing the issues. So this is, I think, a really important slide and something to keep in mind as you all continue on your planning efforts. One of the things we're going to talk for a bit about stepping up, go through the details, and there's actually time on the agenda for you all later to start giving some input into some of the planning and next steps. So this is important. So incarceration is not always directly related to the individual's mental health issues. And so what we see in this study, which was done by Jennifer Scheme and others at UC Berkeley, is that, almost 65% of the time, and they went in and did, an analysis of the crimes, looking at, all of the details that were provided, the crime itself was actually not related, really entirely independent of the person's mental illness, all the way down to the other end of the continuum, which was less than 10%, in which they could determine it was actually a complete direct result of the person's mental illness. And so that becomes important for a number of reasons. And part of it is that, what that means is that while it's critical and critically important that we be addressing an individual's mental illness, it also means that if we only address their mental illness, we may not actually be effective in reducing recidivism, because we may not be getting at some of the other factors that are putting them at risk of committing additional crimes. So this is, the probation folks could do probably the training on this, but this is in the criminal justice world, and most probation departments in California have really been buying into this and adopting risk needs responsivity, trainings and approaches. And this is really recognizing that if we don't actually identify what it is that's putting someone at risk for criminal behavior, we can actually have kind of the opposite effect than we want to. So if we identify lower risk individuals and we group them in with higher risk individuals, we can actually see ourselves increasing their risk of recidivating. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail around this today, but it's really important as you're doing your planning to keep this in mind. Because of that fact that I was saying before, and Jennifer Scheme and others are finding this repeatedly in the data, and actually it came up last night in the conversation with the judge. People are doing well while they're under treatment, but then we're seeing that come back a couple of years later. And part of what may be going on is if we're only dealing with the mental illness, we could be missing some important things. So, this is a slide also still kind of on this idea of criminogenic risk. And so we see, sort of at the outskirts some of the factors that can be important. But really it's these four in the middle that are usually the most common and the most direct to be what drives additional criminal activity, and obviously past behavior is not something we can change, but there are evidence-based programs and approaches that work at thinking and peers and other factors. But if we're only dealing specifically with mental illness, we may be missing that. And so it's really important. And this is, the most effective programs are those that are going to address all of this. It's actually not as complicated as it looks at first. So part of this is called a behavioral health framework that is part of something that the Csg Justice Center put together a couple of years ago. And the idea here is that there are really sort of three different things when we're talking about this intersection that we need to be able to look at and we need to be able to assess. One is criminogenic risk, as I just talked about, those factors that put someone at risk of committing another crime. One is their substance use disorder and assessing that. And then one is their serious mental illness. And so many of our systems now treat all of those, right, those three things kind of separately, right? We don't do it in an integrated way. And what this is trying to do is really say, we want to be able to use our limited resources as effectively as possible. We want to be able to target, the highest, the individuals who pose the highest risk and have the highest needs. And so this is a model for being able to do that. And so you can see right now, if right off the bat, if we know these folks are lower risk, remember, those are the ones you don't want to be keeping in jail, you don't want to be keeping under probation supervision, you really want to keep them out of the criminal justice system as quickly as possible. But you still need to be able to, you still want to be able to identify what their substance use needs are and what their mental health needs are. So it sort of is a way to start categorizing the population. Then once you get to, okay, these are the medium to high criminogenic risk folks. So these are the folks that we really do need to be thinking about criminal justice, potential criminal justice intervention. Doesn't necessarily mean jail, but means you might be looking at some form of supervision or alternatives. But you also then want to know, okay, well, are we dealing with substance use, right? Because we don't want to be dealing, remember that only 12% of the population will be actually giving them both the mental health treatment and the substance use disorder. So if they have, a high substance use disorder need and a serious mental illness, then that's the category that needs, that targeted intervention that we were talking about here. As opposed to, if substance use is not as much of an issue, well then we want to know, is it a high mental health need or a low mental health need, right? And then this allowed, can you imagine if we had a system where assessments exist in all of these areas, where we were really able to do these assessments, share that kind of information, and really target our resources. What ends up happening instead is that, if someone goes through, if they're lucky enough to get through the behavioral health court, then we're kind of figuring this out at kind of the individual level, and our systems are not necessarily set up to do this kind of assessment and dedicated and really kind of targeted interventions. So we can talk more on that. But ideally what we're talking about here, as you can see, is kind of moving from a system of connections or arrows pointed all over every different way to an actual integrated system of care. And that's really, at its essence, what the Stepping Up model is about. So I'll transition into what is Stepping Up. So, as we said, counties have been doing this, they've been working on this, have been trying to address these challenges for a while, and yet the perception in many places is this problem is not getting better, and may even be getting worse. Why is it so hard to fix? Now, really, what I was just laying out for you are a lot of those reasons of why we think it has been so hard to fix. And one of the main things that we talk about with the challenges in doing it is that we so often sort of jump to a pilot project, a program here, let's try this, let's try that, and it's not a systemic approach. And so what we're going to be talking about now is how do we do this in a systemic way. So, Stepping Up Initiative. It is a national initiative. And the goal is very specific, to have fewer people with mental illness in jails tomorrow than we have today. We like to say that it is a movement, it is not a moment in time. And this, it really came together as a result of a number of different partners. So at the national level, behind the initiative, and the three organizations who really envisioned this and made it happen were NACO, which is the National Association of Counties, which CSAC is sort of the state entity there, right? But so that's the National Association of Counties, the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, and then the Csg Justice Center, and the organization that I work with. And you can see many other partners, and NAMI has been one of the key steering committee partners from the beginning as part of this Stepping Up effort. And so the folks got together probably originally about 3 years ago, and kind of around these issues we were talking about in the beginning of like why we have been working on this. We have been trying. We've expanded behavioral health courts. We've expanded mental health training, crisis intervention teams, those kinds of things. We have counties that are like held up as being best practices in some of these, and they still feel like this problem is getting worse. What is wrong? Why is this not working? And really what those folks came together and realized was because we are sort of chasing this with sort of one solution at a time, and we are not really bringing all of the system leaders together and doing this in an integrated approach. So what we need is a paradigm shift. We need to move away from doing this as pilot projects, and we need to really talk about how can we do this to scale and have measurable impact. We need to know, we also think the problem's getting worse, we don't actually even know that, right? So we need to know. We need to know how to make this happen. So how do we take this and sort of simplify it into something that really is manageable and measurable? And so that is what we have. So as you heard, Mendocino County, I understand, was the first county to actually pass a resolution in California around stepping up. Many other counties have followed suit. And there are a few other things that have sort of happened in California around stepping up. As I mentioned in the beginning, we did a survey in partnership with CSAC and the Chief Probation Officer of California and the State Sheriff's Association, initially to kind of get a sense of what was the perception in California among those leaders around where the challenges are, what the problems were. We did a summit about a year and a half ago. Mendocino was well represented at that summit. Along with 52 other counties to try to kind of share ideas and learn about how to approach this. And so here's sort of how the 6 questions framework works in terms of stepping up. So essentially what we'll talk about is there's 6 questions and there's 4 measures, and that's what we organize around. So the 6 questions: is your leadership committed? Well, as we said, right, there's no doubt. Is your leadership committed? Leadership was committed here in Mendocino County, which is great. And there's many, right, so resolution happened, and there are many steps to that, and some of which probably still could use work, and I'll let you all identify those. There may be some, there may be missing partners, there may be, pieces that we need to figure out how to move forward. But so the next question is, do you have timely screening and assessment? So we won't know what the prevalence of people with mental illness in the jails is if we don't actually know who they are. And so we'll talk in a minute about some ways in which we recommend doing that. Again, do you have baseline data? We can't say if the problem's getting worse or better if we don't know what the baseline is. Have you conducted a comprehensive process analysis and service inventory? And that's actually an activity that we're going to kind of start doing with you all a little bit later. But this becomes really important because one of the things that can be so tempting is you hear about what's happening in Austin, Texas, or Miami-Dade, Florida, or other places that are sometimes heralded as having strong approaches in this intersection. And you come back to your county and say, this is what we want to do here. But your gaps may not be the same, right? That may not be what your biggest problem is. And that's kind of part of what we think has gotten us to this problem. So then, once you've done this and you've figured out what your process is and where your gaps are, then you can prioritize what the policies, the practices, and the funding needs are. And then are you tracking progress? And so those are the 6 questions. At the end, I'll show you, so all of these things are available as resources on the Step Up Together website. And this is, just, there's a whole packet on this. And then there actually are webinars available on each of these questions where you hear experts from different counties across the country talking about implementing this. So I said there's 6 questions, and then there are 4 measures. And so the idea is that we need to figure out how to measure these 4 things. And if we can do that, it will help us know if what we're doing as we go through those 6 questions is making a difference. And so this is where you would want your baseline data in these 4 areas. And so one is we want to reduce the number of people who have mental illness booked into jails, right? So we need to know what that prevalence is. We need to know what that number is, and we need to have a way of measuring that on a regular basis. We want to shorten the length of stay for people in jail who have mental illness, right? And so we talked about that. So it's not just about the fact that they're coming to jail, but they're also staying in jail longer. And so we want to be able to shorten that. So we'll talk about some specific things to think about. And then, of course, if you had this data readily available and you could track it, you would be able to say, I think we need to get some more resources in here, right? Our length of stay is going up. What's happening? What do we do wrong? Or it's going down. This is working. We need to increase connection to treatment for people who have mental illnesses as they're leaving jail, right? So you can imagine that there's probably a number of things that you could put in place to reduce the prevalence of people with mental illness in jails. But you want to make sure that you're actually connecting them to treatment as well, right? You don't want to just, the idea is we want to be diverting to treatment. And of course, there are things that you could be doing for all of these that you might see these numbers improve, but your recidivism rates might still be going up. And so you want to know that as well. So like I said, these folks who got together and really put this whole paradigm shift model together really came up with these 4 measures. And we're like, if we can keep it straightforward, if we can really focus on what do we need to do to get these measures in place, and then let those drive our decision making and our resources, etc. How helpful would that be? So we'll walk through these questions. We're going to go a little more in detail with some than others. So question number 1, remember, was, is your leadership committed? We've heard you want the mandate from the county elected officials, that you all have in the form of the resolution. You want a planning team that includes all of the different sectors and systems and stakeholders that need to be involved in doing this. You need a real commitment, not just to the vision, but also to the guiding principles. One of the things that we found repeatedly is that there really needs to be a designated project coordinator and a planning process. So it can be very, you can have all of the best intentions, but this needs to be someone's primary concern, pulling folks together, getting them to the table, making it happen. And everyone needs to commit to this idea of we're going to catch the data so that we can track and hold ourselves accountable for results. This just shows a few different ways across California, the many different ways of doing this. In Calaveras, they've actually brought the Stepping Up effort into their CCP, led by their Chief Probation Officer, Chief Leach. In Orange County, they set up a totally separate Stepping Up committee that reports to what their Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and their Board of Supervisors. And the leads there are the sheriff and one of the supervisors. In Santa Clara, they have a diversion committee that reports to the Board of Supervisors, so there the effort's led by a supervisor and a judge. Santa Barbara, a totally separate planning group led by the sheriff. In Yolo, they have a continuum of care committee, which was kind of going in place around the same time, actually part of their county strategic planning effort. It was set up by the Board of Supervisors, and the lead on their Stepping Up is out of the County Behavioral Health Office. So part of my message here is there are many different ways to do this. That really isn't what matters. What matters is that you have the right partners the table and that they're empowered. It is also super critical that the county executive and the county executive staff be engaged, and so thank you so much to Carmel for having us. And she was the one who organized the several planning calls we have for putting today's event together. It just matters because her office has the big picture and can kind of see the pieces, so it's pretty key there. There's just one other thing that I actually want to say that I didn't mention at the beginning that I also just want to give Mendocino big credit for. This is pretty unusual to not just have the planning committee and we heard the representatives at the beginning, but then to do these kind of longer events where we want to bring different professionals and we want to do a public event. We want to do it 2 places in our county so that we're really accessible to folks who live at different ends of the county. That is pretty exceptional, and in the few instances where I've heard of something kind of like this happening, it's usually been because a crisis just occurred, right? Someone died in jail is often what it is. And so just, big credit to Mendocino for kind of being out there from the beginning on this issue and getting in front of it in the kind of prevention, proactive way. Very impressive. So do you have timely screening and assessment? And there is some done. So as I here in Mendocino County, I haven't looked at it in detail. So I'm going to tell you the kinds of things that we look for, and then as you all dig in, you can look a little more carefully. But as I talked about when we were looking through the behavioral health framework, ideally you really want to be looking not just at mental illness, but also substance use disorders, as well as the risk of recidivism. You want to be doing both screening and assessment, right? So screening is just the way that you can kind of have a quicker tool and you're flagging people so that you know that you can go back and do a more detailed assessment for those who get flagged in the screening. And ideally you want to get to a place where you're electronically collecting that data so that you can do the kinds of collaborative case management and data collection that we were talking about. The issue we talked about at the beginning is also the importance of having the shared definition of serious mental illness. One of the things when we pulled this working group together last year, we found was people talking about the fact that the behavioral health folks sort of talking about the fact that the problem is the sheriff's department will call us all the time about people who are like, this person has a serious mental illness, and then we go to assess them and we realize, no, they have a traumatic brain injury, there's something else going on, right? And I came up with the criminal justice rule. I'm like, I don't get the difference of that, right? And so really realizing that we actually have different professions that have different definitions. We have different legal, like some of these are required by statute for authorizing certain funding streams, right? There's different things. So if you're going to really commit to tracking this data and having this kind of data-driven approach, you all need to have some shared definitions around this. And then whatever screenings and assessments you use should be validated. And so there are a number of tools available that the Pre-Jail Mental Health one is one we often talk about in terms of a screening tool, but we don't necessarily recommend specific screening tools just because we're not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. But whatever it is, you should validate it for your own population, which means making sure that if it's, is it the people that it's screening, do they generally later actually turn out to, in fact, have a higher rate of when you do the full clinical assessment, having a mental illness. Similar for the screenings and the assessments for substance use and for risk of recidivism. So that is important. It's one of those things that, as we bring more and more of these assessments into our professions, I think a lot of us still keep talking about, but it's pretty rare to see that actually done in those counties, but definitely something you want to be thinking about, because the more and more that you have your decisions kind of based on this, the more important that becomes. Then we want to record and report the results, and we've talked about that, to the idea, wherever possible, that you're keeping this in a place where you can actually then electronically be able to use it, both for sharing and collaborative work, but also for data collection. So this is intended to talk about the difference between screening and assessment. The idea, the brief jail mental health screen was actually designed for correctional staff, or jail corrections staff to do it at intake. It does not need to be done by a health professional. And there are a number of counties, Calaveras, Orange County, Santa Barbara, I think, Santa Clara, I think, who are starting to do that. And the idea is to make sure that every single person who comes through the jail is screened. And then that screening identifies who actually needs a full clinical assessment. That assessment then would ideally be done within 72 hours, and that would need to be done by a mental health professional. So, those of you in the criminal justice world want to think about the importance of pretrial risk as well, but that's kind of when we were talking about that framework and sort of who we want to make sure that we're not even keeping in the system, right? All of this ultimately can be integrated, and the best problem solving will get you there. This slide really just kind of talks about it. So imagine all these different assessments are done. Somehow there's a jail mental health screening, there's the risk assessment screening, this is the drug screen, right, the pretrial risk assessment. And right now, chances are, when you all map this out, you'll find that this one goes to this person, this one goes to that person, this one goes to that person. This one's done and no one ever looks at it. You'll have all of those different kinds of things. And so the idea is, if you can come up with a plan in which you're doing these different assessments and they're feeding into an integrated approach, how much more effective could you all be? So that is kind of bringing it all together. So then, we talked about this. So question number 3, do you have baseline data on these 4 different measures that we talked about? Why is it so important? We talked about the fact that because, of course, you could be seeing improvements in a couple of areas and not in one of them, and that would be an important thing to know. We've already talked about a lot of this. We want to have system-wide definitions. Ideally, you want to have electronically collected data. You want to have the baseline data so that you can do comparisons and see where things are getting better, and have that ability to routinely report it. I think right now it's sort of you're going in and you're doing manual counts to figure that out, which is what lots of counties end up having to do at the beginning. People may end up having sort of proxy samples at the beginning because you don't have the screening. That is all, we work with what we have and work toward getting a better model. There are 9 counties that have been recognized for having, sort of really accurate and accessible data. Calaveras County in California is one of them. It is, a small rural county. This is not just a big city solution. Sometimes I think with the data, sometimes I think the smaller counties may have some advantages and some of that. And then, as I said before, this just gives you an idea, and again, there are webinars and more information available, but let's say you start tracking this, and let's say that you see that, kind of where your issues are and the average length of stay. That then helps you drive, some of your decision-making around, okay, well, what do we need to be looking at? Maybe that's where then we need to get in a pretrial risk assessment, because we're not doing that. Maybe we've got some lower risk folks in the jail that we should be getting out to treatment. California has just passed a new mental health diversion bill, so maybe we can take advantage of that. And I just threw that as an example. But again, it really helps you kind of target your resources in what is otherwise a pretty complex problem. This is the one that I think there's some efforts underway to do some more comprehensive mapping over the summer here in Mendocino County. But this is, have you conducted a comprehensive process analysis and inventory? Again and again, when we go into counties, we find that there's so many things existing that people actually didn't even know about. So it's also important that that's part of the reason for opening up to these kinds of larger venues and getting lots of different folks to speak and come to the table and find out what's there. And then that helps you identify where are the gaps and the challenges. And sometimes it might be a specific population that's falling through the cracks, sometimes it may be just additional capacity. I don't say just because that's a simple problem, but it may be specifically additional capacity needed. Or as I said, sometimes it may be that we're serving folks, but it's not really an evidence-based model, and so that's what we need to improve the quality of what's available. And so bringing folks together to do this kind of mapping and inventory is just so important. I have a couple of examples of some counties that have done some mapping. This is the very simple LA column, although I bet that you could do a map that looks just as complicated, right? So yeah, it's kind of here more for kicks than anything else, but it is really, so really what they did, some of you may have heard of sequential intercept mapping, that's the model they used. It doesn't, there's some things about some that really make sense with stepping up, and then there's some things that it can be nice to focus a little bit more on some of the solutions, but so this is the really kind of tracking, what happens at each stage and what processes do we have in place. This is a simplified version of the last one in terms of kind of looking at what happens at each stage, what are the processes, and understanding that. Santa Cruz County did theirs a little bit differently. This is actually sort of similar to something we can do later today in terms of dividing up into kind of more discrete buckets. This was an unnamed urban county in Texas. Again, just to kind of show you, there are many different ways that you could go through this inventory and mapping and figure out where are our gaps, where are our challenges, and where is our current capacity and our strengths. And that can be important because it may be underutilized, and/or you just don't want to forget about it. It's an important piece of your solution. Or I also have YOLO counties in here. This is one of the ones they were doing as part of that strategic planning effort that I mentioned. And again, this is incident, and then they kind of tracked, so who ended up going home, who went to jail, and that's what this is. They're identifying the different things available throughout the process. So after you've done that, ideally, then you get to question number 5, having prioritized policy, practice, and funding. Now we realize that this is not always done totally linearly because you all are making funding decisions every year. And so you're also trying to do this, and actually some of the things that you all have already come up with in terms of the discharge coordinator at the jail, and some of the other pieces are, probably you're going to end up plugging some of those holes that people were identifying as the most important. But that's really what you want to look at. And one of the things, of course, that we would strongly recommend is that as you're assessing these strategies, you're looking and saying, okay, do they focus on one of these 4 key measures? Because if not, maybe that's not a priority for this year. What is it going to do with respect to these 4 key measures in terms of either reducing the prevalence of mental illness in jails, reducing length of stay, connecting people to treatment, or reducing recidivism? If it's not connected to those, then we need to reconsider. And then, ideally, that's where counties would be investing their money. So just to give you an example of how this could work, this is real. This is a California county who did this. And so they had a jail mental health count of about 500 people. And what they did was come up with, what they wanted to do was reduce their admissions of people with mental illness by 10%. That was the goal that they set. And so they figured out, okay, what does that mean in terms of admissions, daily admissions, and so they went through, and this was their baseline data in this box, and then, so for this chart, we're talking specifically about this goal that they had in terms of wanting to reduce admissions by 10%. And so they, did the kind of mapping that we're talking about in terms of where's the gap. So one of the things they realized was that they did have CIT, crisis intervention trained officers, but they didn't have them available 24/7. Which meant that they actually looked specifically at, well, how many calls at what time of day are we getting mental health calls for services that then are not getting CIT trained officers going out. So they came up with, okay, well, what's going to be the best strategy to be able to do that? going back, okay, is this actually going to address one of our key measures, right? Yes, it is. So then they figured out, okay, what is the cost of that? They did that, and then they looked and said, where are the possible funding streams we can use for that? They had identified the funding streams, and then how are we going to know if this is making a difference, and came up with the data, right? And they're seeing that happen. I mean, it's actually working. So it's, you know, it is doable. And you kind of, you know, taking this huge complex problem and then breaking it into something specific. This is what we care about. This is our goal this year. What's the best way to get there? And then, of course, tracking the progress and having that available in an ongoing way. Super important. So, thinking about next steps in Mendocino County. So this is what we're actually going to do in a little bit. We have a break and then a few more speakers, and then we are going to actually do some of this in groups. And what we want to do is get some feedback from you. So it's sort of a modification of what we've seen from some of these other maps. And so this is the kind of thing that we would really encourage you all to continue doing even after today in terms of thinking about this. So we've sort of taken some different stages, trying to divide it into some organizable chunks, right, in terms of whether or not we're talking about prevention, when the incident actually occurs. So this would be, we don't even have to call law enforcement, right? This would be, what are we doing so that we're going to avoid law enforcement contact? This is, okay, an incident has occurred, what's available, what kind of responses. This is about jail booking and services available in jail. Then what are the diversion options, what are the adjudication options, and then what's available post-release connection to treatment. And so when we come back to that activity, we can do that a little bit later. I told you, so here I just have a few slides with some resources that are available on the Stepping Up website. So I mentioned to you the model shared definition. So this is what this working group came up with last year. It's based on the California statutory language, which is important for a mental health funding stream. So the group really felt like we can't come up with something that's just totally different because county mental health is not going to be able to use it in terms of drawing down funding for the specialty mental health services that Janine was talking about. And then it also has a whole like FAQ guide attached to it, so it can be really helpful. And I will tell you that a number of counties really found that they kept getting stuck as they were trying to move forward and stepping up because they realized they were working at cross purposes without having these shared definitions and this shared language. I mentioned this, but so on the Step Up Together .org website, there are a number of toolkits and webinars. There are toolkits on webinars on each of the 6 measures. There's I think it's on my next slide. There's actually a project coordinator's handbook that can walk you through kind of each of the 4 measures and things to do with the groups. There is a county self-assessment that you can do to figure out, kind of where are some of our, areas that we might need to focus a little more on. There's some detailed resources on the screening assessments screenings and assessments, a variety of resources. And then I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier. So often, unfortunately, in so many of our public policy programs, we find that either federal money or foundation money or state grants, something becomes available, and so we go, put in an application and start that program because the funding is available, regardless of whether or not it's necessarily what you all most needed to address the gaps in your system here. And so, like the SMI working definition work group, we also did another work group last year that met over the course of like 6 months around graded funding. And so what we realized was there's so many funding streams available to us in California. I will tell you, in other states, when people hear about our Mental Health Services Act funding, they're just so jealous. And of course, we did Medi-Cal expansion, which not all states did. And I know that in None of that has ended up being, exactly the answer to any of your solutions, but we do have resources. We have AB 109 funding. We have other resources that can be kind of flexible. And so part of what the rated funding tool has a number of different worksheets and processes to go through to really help people, one, make sure that you're doing that kind of process planning first, right? Because we don't want to just start a program because the funding's available. But once you've identified your gaps, then figuring out, okay, what's the most restrictive funding that could only be used for something like this? Because let's use that first, right? And let's save our most flexible funding for those things that we really can't find anything else to spend resources on. And so that can be really important, and so there are lots of resources there. Can be helpful. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the Stepping Up Month of Action, and so there also is on there a social media toolkit. We would love for you all to be able to tweet out and post out and do all of that in social media about the work going on here in Mendocino County, because it's very impressive. Oh, this is the schedule for the so this week, highlight the progress your county has made with its stepping up efforts. Next week, showcase your stepping up team. Week 3, share the experiences of people impacted by the stepping up efforts, and then week 4, encourage your peers and peer counties to step up for mental health. So that's our month of action. So thank you. There's a lot of information. Much of it is available, most of it is available on our website, and I will be around also for the rest of today and tomorrow in Fort Bragg. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We really appreciate all the information. We're happy to say, actually, that in those last steps you described, we finally landed on definitions locally that mirror up to the California definition. And I know that our Behavioral Health Advisory Board Chairperson, Jan McGordy, and our Behavioral Health Director, Janine Miller, and the whole team that Janine introduced earlier on the Committee for Stepping Up spent a lot of meetings to come to those definitions. So I appreciate you describing what hard work that is alone, let alone all the other steps that we're going through. So we're going to take this opportunity to take a few minute break because we have a lot of refreshments, but we're going to call you back in 10 minutes or less because we have some other speakers this afternoon that will be inspirational, and we really want to get your input this afternoon. So just a brief break to grab some refreshments, use the restroom, and we'll be back in less than 10 minutes.
I am chair of NAMI Mendocino County, which is your local affiliate of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'm going to speak for about 2 minutes on NAMI. I'm going to give you my story. Jan's going to tell her story. We're the family member perspective. And then I have my 2 peers here who I'm so proud of, who are going to give you an actual experience of recidivism, etc., in the jail. So, NAMI Mendocino, thank you very much to, where's Janine? She's not here. To the Mendocino County Mental Health Department, and especially Tammy Moss Chandler, who have given us the opportunity to have an office in Ukiah. We're at 564 South Dora Street, Suite E. We have a comprehensive mental health library that anyone is welcome to come and check out books. You do not have to have a diagnosis. You do not have to have anyone in your family who has one. If you're just interested in looking up different diseases, etc., you're welcome to visit us. Okay, so NAMI Mendocino offers 4 programs. We have Family to Family, which is for family members. It's a class for family members on how to deal with mental illness with their loved one, etc. We offer Family Support Group, which is for family members. We offer Connection, which is peer support groups. And we offer Peer-to-Peer, which is for those who have mental health difficulties. So that's NAMI cut really short. You're more than welcome to talk to me, call me anytime. I'm available. And the library. I did, I mentioned that already. Settle down. I need to tell you, I have to apologize. The coffee, the hot water, it didn't work. So we're going to go get coffee, but you know what? If something doesn't go wrong, it's not a good funeral. So that's our So my story. My boy is my godson, but prior to that, his mother suffered from schizophrenia, and back in the mid-90s, she was in and out of jail constantly. And unfortunately, when he was 4 years old, she committed suicide. Skip forward, December 26th, sometime between December 26th and December 30th of 2008, and it's interesting how you remember dates. He had his first schizophrenic break. His grandmother knew, who obviously he lives with because he didn't have a mother, knew exactly what was wrong with him. She tried to get help starting January of 2009. And at that time, there wasn't anything available. September 27th of 2009, he had his first encounter with law enforcement. He was arrested for resisting arrest, and he was put in juvenile hall for 3 days. He had a great attorney who got him declared mentally ill. Did it help him? No. The only thing it did was not make him responsible for the charges that he was charged for. So in October, he was walking down the middle of the street, and a law enforcement officer said, "Hey, you can't do that." He got scared, he ran. It was an ugly situation. He was sentenced to juvenile hall for 14 days. In February, February 2010, he was arrested for trespassing. He spent another 5 days in juvenile hall. And then in April of 2010, he was arrested for a parole violation, and he spent 35 days in juvenile hall. So in less than 7 months, that boy spent 2 months, short 2 days, in juvenile hall, 4 trips, and nothing happened. Finally, when he did get 5150 or 5280 or whatever, when you spend a lot more than 72 hours, he went to Vallejo, and he spent 28 days in Vallejo, and he lucked out. He got a psychiatrist who didn't have an ego, and who finally, towards the end when they were going to have to let him go, called in 2 other psychiatrists, and they came up with the right concoction. They came up with the right cocktail, and they stabilized him. He came home on June 13th of 2010. Since June 13th of 2010, to this day, he has not had a law enforcement encounter. Kudos to him. He has a support system. He has his grandmother who knows mental illness inside and out. He has an excellent psychiatrist who he can call or she can call 24 hours a day. It hasn't, I'm not going to lie to you, it has not been perfect. With any chronic illness, there's ups and there's downs. But if you have a support system and someone looking out after you, they can catch that shoelace before it becomes untied. And that's what luckily has happened with my boy. So if you take a 7-month period of a revolving door, and then all of a sudden he got help, and it's been 9 years, I think that's important. And that's my story. So next I have Jan, who's also a nominee.
My name is Jan Gordy, and I don't want to go into my whole story today. I just want to talk about my son's experience with the jail. And I have a disclaimer that this happened in 2012, so I'm thinking some things have changed since then. But anyway, when my son was a young adult, he had some setbacks in his life, and he was seeing a counselor in Santa Rosa. his behavior had become more and more erratic. And one day the counselor asked me, has he had contact with law enforcement yet? And I'm very surprised, what has law enforcement got to do with this? Silly me, little did I know. So my son was prescribed a variety of medications during this time, but eventually he stopped taking them. And just for your information, psych meds can be very tricky if you're not aware of this. And an individual must weigh the cost and effect of the medication and med compliance if the side effects are so severe. So he stopped taking his meds and he became increasingly violent, and we had to call 911. And I must say we had a good experience with the sheriff's office, with the deputies who came out. They talked to us first and then to him, who at this time was not out of control, and said they would take him to talk to a nice lady, which meant they were going to put him on a 5150 hold for psychiatric assessment. And in summer, he was hospitalized 3 times. We had to kick him off our property for violent behavior and refusal to take his medication for his illness. And he became homeless, but not for long, because he finally laid down in front of Safeway and wouldn't move. So he was booked into jail on a misdemeanor charge. So the public defender took his case herself. And not too much later, he was released from jail, and right away I got a call from her. She said he'd been released and had gotten some hands on some alcohol and had been rearrested at St. Mary's School. So this is very puzzling to me because I knew he didn't have any money. I knew there weren't any liquor stores by St. Mary's School. And much later I asked him about this, and he said, well, behavioral health had picked him up and taken him to their office on George Street, and then they told him he could leave. I told him they thought he was drunk, and he asked if there was a breathalyzer test. Silly me, I hadn't thought to ask that at the time. He said he was psychotic and didn't know what to do. Remember, they just told him he could leave. There's no plan for where he could go or what he was to do. So he went into the office at St. Mary's to ask for help. So he ended up in jail and stayed there for 6 months. He still refused to take his meds, even though I spoke to the jail staff frequently and took his meds to them or him. He reportedly was provoking other prisoners, so he was placed in solitary confinement where he quickly decompensated. He lost a lot of weight because he wouldn't eat. He hallucinated that there were worms in his food, he told me. And he generally refused to see me when I came to see him, often, because he didn't want to leave his cell. And when he appeared in court, chained and dressed in orange, he was completely unkempt and laughed hysterically. The judge ordered meds, but they were not given. The judge ordered competency, but there were no beds available in the state. Finally, he was given court-ordered medication and had an immediate positive response. All charges were dropped after 6 months. And the judge asked him what he wanted to do. He asked for a hotel room, but behavioral health took him to a homeless shelter in Fort Bragg, even though he was conserved at the time. He became med compliant with help. I had to call behavioral health in Fort Bragg, and began his road to recovery. As a result of this experience, I became a rabid advocate for mental health services, which are still abysmal. I am very hopeful with the goals of the Stepping Up initiative for jail diversion. This process calls for collaboration across the broad array of public systems, which currently act independently. Each system has its own set of rules, written and unwritten, and its own data management system, but it's separate from each other, and there's little, if any, communication between them. This severely affects people's lives. When someone is suffering from mental illness, like my son, they are often trapped in a quagmire of obstacles that is in the prison system. So we don't, by default, and another place to go. As Elizabeth has said, jails and prisons have become the new mental institution. The only metaphor I could think to describe this was like an automobile. So if it's not working, you take it to a mechanic shop, And the mechanics fix the part that has a problem, the transmission, the brakes, whatever. And this is like if someone has a certain ailment like a heart attack or cancer, one goes to the doctor, the ER, and sees a specialist who addresses the problem. And the family and the friends that gather around to offer their thoughts and prayers and support. In contrast with mental illness, it's like taking that automobile into a shop where it's completely dismantled. The brakes may be fixed, but the tires are up in the corner. The chassis is lying by itself on the middle of the floor, but the body is somewhere else. There's no way that car is going to move out of the shop on its own volition, even if all the pieces are working in working order separately. It's like going to the ER for help with mental illness. Even though a hospital may claim its vision is to improve physical, mental, and spiritual health, they really don't want to see them as patients. They can either send them to the psychiatric hospital, but if they won't take them, they go back to the streets or the jail. And family and friends shy away because it is so embarrassing. To me, this is what the mental health system looks like. Surely there is a better way. Our societies become very compartmentalized, but we need to find a way to come together for the betterment of mankind. Nowhere is this more apparent than in treating mental illness. If people need help, they should be able to move seamlessly from one public agency to another in a coherent manner. All of these agencies are there to serve the public and society. They must be able to get medical help like any other disease. People suffering from mental illness must be diverted from the dead end of our default mental institutions, prisons, and given a chance at life. Thank you.
So now we're going to have two of our peers, and I appreciate them so much because as hard as it is for a family member to come out, it's even harder. So we're going to have John first and Crystal second, and I'm so proud of these guys.
This really is hard for me. You know, I gotta tell you, I play music, right? And I perform on stages and stuff. This is like 10 times, anyway, this seems way harder. I'm gonna give you a disclaimer real quick, and that is that this first part I'm gonna tell you about real quick happened a long time ago, so you don't have to worry about me today. I mean, well, maybe. Okay, so from the age of 12, I was in juvenile hall till I graduated to jail. At 17, they emancipated. They knew I was just a problem. And then I was in jail, prison, Delancey Street and CRC, and there's more. N number, Z number. A lot of stuff. So from the age of 12 basically to the age of 34, I was either very loaded or doing things to get loaded or incarcerated. Never once, well no, I take that back. One time, I was in one of the prisons, I think it was Tracy, and I went in to see a psychiatrist. I sat there for 20 minutes and did a water thing. I remember that. They had this weird looking butterfly thing and stuff. And that was the only diagnosis I ever had my whole life. So that being said, I got clean. I quit. I got clean. I finally got clean through a program. Okay, and never was the mental health part of my life addressed even then. And it really has never been addressed, to tell you the truth. But I can tell you right now, I can tell you right now that at the age of, I can't tell you what age I was in the 4th grade, but anyway, in the 4th grade, here you have a kid in the 4th grade who gets in a fight with his teacher, who was reprimanding him for something that I did wrong. And I hit her and ran out and got kicked out of school and got kicked out of every school I've ever been in since. I even got kicked out of juvenile hall school. Into juvenile hall. It's funny though. But point is that nobody said, hey, what's up with this kid? Why is he hitting a teacher in 4th grade? There's something going on. And I think, I'm telling you these things because the people that are incarcerated today, I don't think they're a whole lot different than they were when I was being incarcerated. Maybe, I can't think of anything that would be different. And I can tell you that through my experience of hanging out with them, because they put me in there with everybody, is that we had one huge thing in common, and that was that we were addicts, right? Okay, that was then. That was what my identification with everybody in that system was we were addicts. Because I had no idea about what the hell. I hate acronyms. PTSD. Why would I have? What is that? I don't have that. And like my drug of choice was, of course, heroin because it worked the best. And but if whatever would do something to change my shame and my thinking I wasn't human, really. Because when you have a family that beats you and does horrible things to you that you look to for love, you think something's wrong. That's all there is to it. So I had to do a lot of work around that, but that did not take away the fact that I still got. And I tell you, I know I don't need to. I should probably go get diagnosed, but I probably don't need to. I can tell you right here, right now, I got PTSD. There's no doubt about it. And the reason I say that is because I'm nervous and I'm sweating. I'm standing in front of you, and probably everybody in this room will come up here, stand, and not sweat. I don't know. That's how I feel. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I know that I'm nervous as hell. And I'm glad it's only 8 minutes. But, because see, I figured out through my step work, through this program we're talking about, that I am not what I did, all the things I did to keep myself locked up in all those places, is not who I am. It's what I did. I did what I did behind no answer to my problem. And what I mean by that is nobody said, hey kid, something's up, let's talk, let's go, let's see what's going on. We want to support you, No, they left me to my own devices. I'm really bad to be left at my own devices because I found some really good shit that would take every feeling I ever had completely away. No diagnosis, right? So I think I'm saying all this because I think it'd be cool if it'd be like a criteria when somebody comes through the door to get booked, that they have an assessment. See if they got some you guys, I don't even know what you do these days. I have not been involved, thank God, hello, or whoever, I haven't been involved in the system, so I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the jails are like. I know what they were like. But, so, I see a lot of people that are really into helping and making this awareness about the fact that people like me, who you would go, oh, he's just an addict. Oh, that's an addict. Right? I thought that, so why wouldn't you? But then I go, oh wait, I'm an addict. And this program says, oh, you really shouldn't ask why. Doesn't matter why. You got it. Why? You were born with it. Why? I don't know, right? But what I realized, thinking back and looking at it all now, I really wish I would have known why, because if I had known why, maybe I could have sought some different help aside from what I got from this beautiful program. Okay? So, I'm not saying anything, I'm saying that kept me alive enough to be able to stay clean, but I gotta tell you, man, some days, like, my shit just goes, oh. And, that's all there is to it. So, maybe I should. I mean, I'm considering, seeing somebody about all that. I mean, I've seen a couple of people. I had a lady tell me that I've probably been depressed my whole life, and she was a psychiatrist. I remember that. We were in a session with a woman I was with, and she told me that, and I was like, nah. She wanted to give me medication. And I'm like, oh no, I don't do, But things change over the years, right? Okay, I've probably taken up 8 minutes, and I did good.
Now we have Crystal.
I never know how close to stand to these things. I'm Crystal. I'm going to tell you a true story full of facts. That's what I'm going to do. When I was a child, I never felt normal. And that continued from as far as I can remember, as far back, which is about 5 years old. I never felt normal. Not even in my abnormal family. Something was just never quite right. And as I grew up, that feeling just got bigger. I had attempted suicide 3 times before I was 13 because I didn't feel normal. I had a lot of stuff going on in my life at that time, but I'm not going to speak to that because I think that environment plays a part, but I was born the way that I am. I'm a rapid cycling bipolar. So I don't know if you guys have covered that. What it means is that unmedicated, I go like this daily. Okay, so your hella happy days, right? That can happen 4 or 5 times in a day. Your worst day, the saddest day, the most angry day you've ever had in your life, that happens on a regular basis, about once every 4 days. That's what it is to rapid cycle. So, you can imagine that my teen years were interesting. I did a lot of not okay things, trying to feel okay. And what ended up happening is that people went, oh, well, that's just Crystal. That's just Crystal. She's just crazy. That's fine. She's a problem. I was that girl. They used to call me Trouble, lovingly. Oh, here comes trouble. Only it wasn't really a joke. And my aunt told me several years after I turned 21 that the majority of the people in my life at that time did not think I would make it past 21. I'm 38. I have 2 children. So we're going to fast forward through all of this. I'm a drug addict. At 18, somebody introduced me to methamphetamine, and I was normal. It was the first time in my life I ever felt normal, level, on an even keel. I had the ability to control my mouth, to control my actions in the beginning, right? And I figured out a way to monitor my dosage. Right? Because what I knew was that at a certain amount, I could be level. But if I did more, I would be high. Right? And there were side effects that came with this type of medication, right? Like I was going for the normal, the feel good. There's all this other stuff that happens in your brain. in your nervous system and your perception and the way things are going. So fast forward several years with 2 children, I'm trying to stay clean. Mind you, this is the only thing that's ever allowed me to feel normal my whole life. I've been to therapy, I've been diagnosed, and so far this was the thing, right? But I have children, I can't be doing that. So I struggled, and I struggled, and I struggled. And my suicidal ideations came up. And they came up really, really hard. And my mother at the time owned a 9mm gun, which I stole from her. And I went down to the river by myself. And for about 6 hours, I held that gun to my face. Because I could not see another solution. I could not see an end to the insanity, right? Because here's the truth, I'm a good person. I do good things. I do good things because it feels good. Because at the heart of me is humanity, and that's the muscle I'm trying to exercise, right? But I have all this stuff in my brain, physically not normal. Fast forward, obviously I didn't pull the trigger. A few months later, right, I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I got loaded, and I hadn't been loaded in a few months, and I got so loaded that I was gone. And what I did was I went and I burglarized my boyfriend's godfather's house. I don't know why I went there. I don't know why I did that. The things that I took were insignificant, right? I don't know, I took too much, right? And I got arrested. I told her myself. I do that a lot, I would tell myself. But I got arrested for it. And when I was given 6 months, and I did half time, and then I did probation. It was a felony charge. I was completely guilty, and I did my time. While I was doing my time, however, I was unmedicated. So all my symptoms came back, and they came back tenfold. They just came back. And I'm in jail for the first time at 30-something years old, with nothing but women in prison movies from the 80s to gauge anything on. So I go into this jail and I think I'm gonna die, right? Well, it was a little bit worse than that. I had COs threaten to put me in solitary because I couldn't stop crying. I had inmates target me because I cried. I couldn't express my anger because of charges. I couldn't defend myself because we were on camera all the time. I couldn't defend myself against a group of women who have been in and out of jail, who were bored and saw a target. Fast forward, okay? I'm out of jail, I'm off probation, struggling with my addiction, so I'm relapsing, every 6-7 months, something like that. Right? It's a clock. I have a break. And I ended up in the hospital. I've been in the hospital 3 times in the last 2 years. I've also been on medication for the last 2 years. I've been on a lot of different medications, and that's a problem. One of the medications that my doctor gave me, sent me, had a completely opposite effect in it, and it caused me to become delusional and angry and borderline violent. I'm standing here and I'm trying really hard not to cry because I actually haven't thought about this in a long time. I lost my daughter through that process. And I remember the night that they arrested me for a violation. I was in Motel 6 with my daughter. I wasn't loaded. I hadn't been loaded. But this was the same cop that had arrested me for the burglary. The same cop who was gonna make a case out of me, right, until I acted right. He came in and he found a tie-off and said, "Oh, you must be loaded." And I said, "No, I'm not." And we went back and forth for about 2 minutes, and finally he said, "Crystal, if you don't tell me that you're loaded right now, I'm gonna put your daughter in a separate car and you won't see her again." What did I say? I'm fucking loaded. I couldn't be more loaded. I couldn't be more loaded, right? I had no choice at that time. This is someone with a great amount of power, right? And on paper, I look like shit, you guys. I'm sorry to cuss, but I don't look good on paper. Because I lost my daughter. Because I was a drug addict. I was trying to get back on track. I was 2 weeks away from a rehab. No one would listen. So I spent 55 days in jail, 50 of them unsentenced. When I got out, I could not see my child. Technically, she's still a ward of the state. She's 17. I was on a specific medication at the time that my court date came up, and because this medication took all of my feelings from me, all of them, I gave her up. I gave her to the state. The state told me I was unfit. The police told me I was unfit. My mother told me I was unfit. My children love me. I just got done dropping my daughter off. She wants to come and hear me speak, right? Because she loves me. Why? Because I'm a good person. I love and I care. And I don't just care about my children. I work in a place that's a wellness center where people just come in. And my job is to care about them. That's my job. That's what I get to do today. Right now, I'm being tapered off the medication, and they're going to put me on a new medication. Because my doctor said my symptoms aren't controlled enough. That's going to leave a huge gap without medication. I know that I'm going to become symptomatic, and then it's going to get worse before it gets any better. This is my life. I did not ask for this. I didn't stand in the line next to the ice cream line and be like, I don't want to be crazy. I'm going to stand here all day until it's my turn. Nobody stares in that line. Nobody. We're people first. We just happen to have something wrong. Do you know the deal with schizophrenia? This is a very interesting fact, and it blew my mind when I learned it. They're schizophrenic because they have more fluid in between their gray matter than you do. That is literally it. So when you think about mental health, right, and you go into the us and them, because you will, it's normal, it's natural, we fear these things. People are afraid of mental health because they're faced with their own mental health, right? We see schizophrenics walking down the street and go, oh my God, that's not me. There's nothing wrong with it, right? It's nothing to be stigmatized. It's something you address. Just like you address gingivitis in your child, right? You brush your teeth, brush your teeth, brush your teeth. We see the child not brushing your teeth, you go to the father, you go to the auntie, you get people, right? And they're like, brush your freaking teeth. And eventually they're gonna brush their teeth. But see, you saw something that wasn't healthy, and you went, oh no, I gotta address this. And that's it's totally fine. But you see a child who isn't acting right, you immediately don't want to address that. You want to move them. And when I say you, I'm not talking about you. It's a very general you. It's the us and them. You see what I'm saying? The goal is to blur the line between us and them. Because there really is very small. There's a lady, late in life, had a huge career, everybody loved her, family, husband, had a break, late onset schizophrenia, lost everything. So really, when I say there is not much difference, we're talking just some stuff in your brain. These people, us people, we have feelings, we have hopes, we have dreams. I have goals and aspirations. I have them now because I know that I can. And I'm going to end this story with telling you that the moment I became medicated, I did not want to use. I have not wanted to use once. I have been in the ghetto. I have been surrounded with my drug of choice. I have been surrounded with my means in which to use that drug of choice. And never once have I wanted to use. So that's something to think about when you're out there and you're with the drug addicts, right, that are acting kind of crazy. It's possible that the reason they're drug addicts is because they're trying to medicate something else. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jen.
So I'm going to invite Crystal and John and Donna and Jan to come up front with us. With Elizabeth, we're going to ask you to come up as well. And Janine. And we're going to take this inspirational moment to think about how to ask some compelling questions, because then we're going to go into a group activity to blur some lines. So you can take that table over there, Donna, if you want to, if everybody wants to see. See up there with the speakers. We're going to open up, we have about 10 minutes or so for questions from the audience. And so thinking about what you heard from Elizabeth and Farah this morning, from Janine about the system of care right now in Mendocino County for behavioral health, and what we've learned from NAMI this afternoon. I want to open it up for any questions that you have from the group, from the audience, and certainly they'll be here afterwards if you have one-on-one questions. But I wanted to open it up for any questions from the group that I'm going to ask. I think we're in a small enough room, we have a microphone up here if we need it for audience questions, but we'll ask you to shout out if you have any questions for you right now. Anyone, you can ask any individual question about any of the presentations today, of Elizabeth, or Janine, or Farah, and you can ask any questions of NAMI. They're ready for it. They wanted to ask them questions this afternoon. Mike?
So I just wanted to ask Donna or Jen, what are the classes you have over at NAMI right now? The classes?
We will be holding a family again in September here in Ukiah. We tried to do something over in Fort Bragg. Didn't work out because our family teacher over in Fort Bragg got ill. But we will be having family to family in September. We hold it at least once a year here. We also have family support group, which is actually tonight, which I will be present at. And then peer-to-peer will be happening within the next 4 months.
And Joy has a flyer in the back, this blue flyer. It'll be at the table back here, and there's some on both sides of the room. It'll have more information about NAMI's classes and how to call and be in contact with NAMI. Go ahead, Tom.
What time is the class tonight?
It starts at 6:30 to 8, and that's for family members, and that's support group. It happens every other Tuesday.
It was last night.
I'm sorry, it was last night.
I wasn't
there either. I barely remember last night.
But that's a different story.
It's way different. What happens at Crush stays at Crush.
Thank you, Mike. There were just questions in the back.
I just want to say, after the personal sharing that the posted at the end, thank you. And I'm a new social worker at Howard Memorial, and Dr. Miller, I was wondering, can you come, well, you said there are people that do outreach, training, and education, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Maybe we can have you come, or that person can come.
So I will, Robin Meloche she can stand up. She is our mental health and substance use outreach, education, and trainer. She does assist and safe talk trainings for the county.
Okay, I'll come over.
Is there another question in the back?
I think you guys do a great job, just hearing these stories. And asking for the Latino community, do you have Spanish as a community?
We do not right at the moment. We're trying to outreach to the Hispanic community. Yeah, exactly. Any volunteers, we're more than welcome to have you. We will put you through classes and get that. We have one person trained in Spanish family to family, but we need more than that. So we really, if you have a way to outreach to the Hispanic community, I'm more than willing to talk to you.
Yeah, yes, actually.
Because it's a great need, not only in the Hispanic community, but the Native American community, etc. It's huge everywhere, and no one is immune. So I'm more than welcome to take phone. My number's on the brochures. I can give you a business card. More than welcome to anyone in any ethnic community, anything, period. More than welcome to have it on board.
Thank you. Buffy, did you want to share something?
Oh no, I'm just saying, yeah, me too.
I have another question. You know, the folks from Sacramento were talking about necessity to keep kind of triage so that you have less people with mental health issues hiding in the jail. Well, I was thinking, is there some way for, like, at our ED in Howard or at other hospitals, is there some way to do assessments where we also can triage, either at the front door, or is there a way of measuring, or is there material available so that we can measure, like, how many people are coming that have forensic issues or mental health issues or substance abuse? Like, are there some materials already available that we could plug into so that we could start triaging differently, or?
So for Elizabeth and Farah, are you aware already of emergency department triaging and assessing that's done by medical professionals?
Yeah, I can't remember if that's specifically on the website, but we definitely have other partner, counties that we could get that information from if it's not on the website. So let's follow up afterwards.
Yeah, or like a way of measuring, like if we knew we're serving this percentage of this population, then even we can start to create services differently within the hospital, you know what I mean? So
yes.
Either just measuring it for that, or measuring it to triage it on the front side.
Right. And I think that's a good point, right? Because it can be used both in terms of your own, like determining what kind of resources you need, as well as connecting people to treatment, and collaboratively, approaching these issues from a larger community. Yeah.
I think what's really important to note here in Mendocino County is we don't currently have a crisis stabilization unit. We will through Measure B in the next few years. But we currently actually, our crisis teams with Redwood Community Services actually utilize the emergency departments for crisis. But I think this is even that additional question about people who aren't currently in crisis, and this screening tool about identifying people early when they're presenting themselves, not necessarily, it's not been identified yet that they're in a mental health crisis. So that we'll definitely look at, so step up together, and then we'll explore that a little further because we have great partnership and key partners like Dr. Barish with Howard involved already in different mental health capabilities. So I think it's a really great question. I think what other tools are we not tapping into that we could, and then really a good understanding of what we are tapping into already through our crisis teams. Buffy?
Yeah, it's for the stepping up together. There was a lot of mention about referrals to evidence-based, I guess, therapies or treatments. With that, so in evidence-based, is there anything that covers culturally and traditional relevance, like to Native American, to Latina?
It's a really important question. More and more people are looking at that and talking about that and questioning that. And so the better models would be taking that into consideration, but because depending, and so that's part of the responsivity in the criminal justice evidence-based work. We talk about risk and need and responsivity, and so responsivity is whether or not you're actually culturally responsive is a huge part of that.
Right.
So it can be, but it's not always.
Right. And so my main concern is that we have 10 federally recognized tribes just in Mendocino County, and then there's at least 3 other groups that aren't federally recognized, and then we have families who, would do well to have these services. And I know that we have 2 IHSs in the county, although counseling and treatment is limited also in that aspect. And I know that our people end up in the system via the, coming through the courts and the jails, and so that's why it's important to me. And it's already something that we're already doing as a county. The work that I do, I work in public health, and so I'm working with the tribes more, and so I understand that gap.
Robin, then Robin.
I also, when we're speaking about culture, I also want to know if we're including our LGBTQ population and our gender spectrum. These numbers.
I think these questions are so important. That's why it can be so helpful to do some of that mapping, because what you may find is we do have this, but it only feels safe for this population, or it only is literally geographically accessible for this population, right? So to really think through who can and can't access various things. So when we get to the exercise in a little bit, hope there'll be some chance to start doing that, but these are great questions.
Thanks. Can Joy or someone come up and flip back to that slide, please? I don't know where the clicker is at this point, but Elizabeth can do that too. So I want to have Mo ask this question because the question was a great segue into what we're going to talk about next around what assets or gaps do we have, and really kicking off our next phase of stepping up. I'm thinking I had no idea that was what that was. So Mo, you have a question.
I think it might end up being more of a comment, but I think that one of the most important things of this initiative is that law enforcement should not be the first key point of contact for somebody dealing with a mental health issue. And what does that look like for our community? How do we make sure that we have resources for families that have a family member that is currently in crisis to be able to quickly and easily reach somebody that can help them through that without calling law enforcement to the point that they can. I mean, I think that training for our law enforcement, certainly our sheriffs, our police, and our jail officers should all have mental health training and how to deal with folks that are in crisis, but not getting them there in the first place.
So I hope you all were able to hear Mo, because what she just said was actually what this map is, right? That we should first hope that no one actually has to interface with law enforcement. It shouldn't be the first point of contact. So we're going to talk about prevention and intervention, and how do we prevent someone who has experienced their first break, like Crystal talked about, or ongoing concerns like John talked about. Any point in the system, what kind of things do we currently have in our community that are preventing someone from ever having to interface with law enforcement when they're having a mental health crisis, and or at any point in their journey, and what interventions do we have in place. But then, for the second piece is, but when an incident occurs that involves law enforcement, what do we do, what strengths do we have? And really, for everyone to know here, we had our first crisis intervention trainings that were full spectrum trainings for law enforcement. We've had 2 so far in partnership with the Sheriff's Office in Nottingham and Behavioral Health and Recovery Services for exactly this purpose of making sure our individuals who are on the streets and interfacing with people know what to do in that kind of crisis response. And then what are we doing, and what more can we do at the point of jail booking when actually an incident escalates into an arrest? And then after the arrest, like Elizabeth said earlier, what things do we have to divert? Ideally divert a jail stay at all at that point, or to adjudicate, so that's the least amount of time possible. And then what kind of programs do we have in place, or do we need to have in place post-release from jail? So anything I missed on that, Elizabeth, quick summary that you would want to restate as we get ready to dive into our groups?
The only thing I was just thinking of related to the last question that just came up is that in addition to thinking about prevention and what happens with law enforcement, there's kind of some prompting questions up in the little box, but when the incident occurs, it could be, is there additional training that the 911 dispatch could also get, and whether that's around being able to identify something as a mental health call, or if that is about cultural responsiveness. So also think outside of, just kind of what we normally talk about, to anything else you all can think about. And again, do you want me to explain the charts?
Yeah, I think before we go there, actually that's a really important piece, because even in John's story about schools, in 4th grade, what could have happened then, so not just at law enforcement first. You might not all be able to see the prompting questions. Elizabeth will take us through it as we divvy up into our groups, but this is Supervisor McCowan's favorite topic, housing first models. What other supportive employment, trauma-informed care, integrated services, what are those prevention services? So it'd be great if you could explain, and we'll start to gather up. So the facilitators and their partners should get ready, and we'll